Hi, welcome to today's video. My name is Paul. So this week I'm going to be doing some charcoal landscape drawing inspired by minimalism. So I'll start off the video. I'll say a few things about minimalism and then you'll see me doing a little bit of drawing and I'll show you some recent minimalist charcoal drawing landscapes. Okay, so on the left of the screen you can see an example of the type of thing I'm talking about. I think you can see what I mean when I say it's inspired by minimalism. Minimalism as an art movement kind of appeared, I suppose, in the 1960s, and a lot of people would say that it was a reaction to abstract expressionism. Abstract expressionism, again, a lot of people say was really the end of modernism, and then pop art and minimalism and a few other things were at the beginning of the postmodern or contemporary art movements. I'm not a fan of postmodern art. I much prefer modernism, but I do like pop art and minimalism. They do have a little bit of an influence on the type of art that I try to make. In the case of minimalism, so on the right of the screen, I've put a few sort of key ideas from minimalism. One thing I should say, the minimalist art movement was in general, not entirely, but in general, it was not painting. It was, I guess, kind of sculpture, but not really sculpture either, because very often the artists were using objects that they didn't create themselves, but were just found objects or mass-produced objects. And they arranged them within a space, and that was their minimalism. There were a few artists producing painted or drawn artworks, and that's more the sort of thing that I'm interested in. So, as I say, on the right of the screen, you have sort of three ideas from this sort of minimalism. First of all, it's about reduction and simplifying what you can see. So in the case of landscapes, and that's really what I'm talking about in this video, in the case of landscapes, if you reduce the landscape down to a few basic elements, you have the sky, the land, and where they meet, you have the horizon line. And those are, I guess, the three basic elements of a landscape drawing or painting. If it's a coastal scene, then you've got the coast and the sea as well, so it's a little bit more complicated, but basic landscapes, you've got three main elements. And of those three elements, it's the sky and the horizon line that mostly interest me. I'm less interested in the land itself, and as you can see in the example on the left, there's really only a hint of a landscape. It's mostly just the sky. And what I was trying to do in this little drawing was to capture the idea of winter. So after a snowstorm or something, the clouds clear away, you get these sort of maybe wispy white clouds, maybe a sort of wind-blown sky. It's that sort of feeling that I was trying to capture in this little drawing. In that sense, that's really what interests me about minimalism. Can we simplify or reduce everything down to just the basic elements? We're just trying to get the essence of this winter landscape in this case. So that's the thing that really appeals to me. There's a few other ideas within minimalism that interest me, but are less of an influence. So, for example, the artwork is what it is. It's just some charcoal on a piece of paper or some paint on a canvas, whatever it is. That idea, while I can see the point and it is interesting to think about it in that way, it's not something that I really agree with, because to me, visual art, painting and drawing, does have a meaning. It's not just blobs of paint or charcoal dust on a piece of paper. it can mean much more to the artist and also to the person viewing the art. So the idea that, minimalist works reject illusionism, a painting is just a flat surface. I say, yes, I get that, but to me, it's more than that. It says something. It does have some sort of meaning. But definitely the first point is something that I agree with. This idea of reducing everything down to the bare bones, the essential elements, and just getting rid of all the unnecessary details. I think it's an interesting exercise if you've never done it, especially somebody who works a lot with photographic references. If that's the case for you, you probably deal with a lot of details. And at some point you have to decide, how much of this detail do I include? How much of it can I leave out? Doing this sort of minimalism exercise can be useful because the idea here is you're trying to limit as much detail as possible, only including what is absolutely essential for the thing to actually look like a landscape drawing or painting. So it is an interesting exercise. Another example, same thing again. This is willow charcoal just on cartridge paper. So just a generic sketchbook, nothing fancy. I put down some charcoal for the sky, smudge it with, I use tissue paper or Kleenex if you like. You could use your hand. That works as well. It does get messy though. Any sort of soft material really will help you to smudge the charcoal. And that changes the values. It also softens the edges. It's a little bit like painting with charcoal dust. It's an interesting experience. Once I have the sky done, I put in the horizon. That's just a little line drawing with the charcoal. And then using a kneadable eraser, I lift off a little bit of the charcoal in the sky, exposing the white paper underneath. And this sort of gives a feeling of clouds against the sky. So it's not a complex way of making art, but the final results, I like them. I like the aesthetic. And just leaving as much white paper as possible. And then one more example. So next I'll show you a video of me doing this example you can see on screen. It's just a short little video. Okay, so as I say, the materials I'm using, it's just willow charcoal on cartridge paper. You can get special paper for charcoal, but it's more expensive. And for this type of drawing that I'm doing, I personally don't think it's necessary. The only thing I would say about the paper is think about the surface texture. Is it a smooth paper? Does it have a bit of texture on it? Also, is it a softer surface or is it quite a hard, shiny surface? They all have different pros and cons when it comes to working with charcoal. So this paper is quite smooth, but it does have a softer surface. So you can build up a little bit more charcoal dust in the paper. If it has a very shiny surface, very smooth surface, something like a Bristol board type of paper, you're not going to get as much pastel dust into the paper. Most of it's just going to sit on the surface and then fall off. So pros and cons. There's interesting things you can do with charcoal on Bristol board that doesn't work on a more absorbent paper. But in the case of this drawing, that's it pretty much. That's the scan of the final one. It is, as I say, reducing everything down. How little charcoal can you put onto the paper and it still sort of looks like a landscape. Then this one, a little bit more complicated in the sense that I use the kneadable eraser in the sky to create this sort of feeling of white clouds. The skies are also very abstract in the sense that it kind of looks like a sky maybe, but I'm not actually drawing clouds and things. I'm just making abstract marks that, I say, kind of resemble a sky. So anyway, that's my little experiments with charcoal and being inspired by some of the ideas of minimalism. It is, as I say, a useful exercise, especially if you're the kind of person who does lots of very detailed drawings and paintings and you want to sort of loosen up a bit and simplify things. Try doing some of these little landscapes, and just with the goal of, putting down as little paint or as little charcoal as possible, but still having something that kind of resembles a landscape. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching and listening, and hopefully see you in next week's video.